Section 1 of Library of the World's Best Literature, Ancient and Modern, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Martin Geeson. Library of the World's Best Literature, Ancient and Modern, Volume 1. Section 1. Essay on Abelard by Thomas Davidson. Pierre, the eldest son of Béranger and Lucie Abelard, was born at Palais near Nantes and the frontier of Brittany in 1079. His knightly father, having in his youth been a student, was anxious to give his family, and especially his favourite Pierre, a liberal education. The boy was accordingly sent to school under a teacher who was at that time making his mark in the world, Roscelin, the reputed father of nominalism. As the whole import and tragedy of his life may be traced back to this man's teaching, and the relation which it bore to the thought of the time, we must pause to consider these. In the early centuries of our era, the two fundamental articles of the Gentile Christian creed, the Trinity and the Incarnation, neither of them Jewish, were formulated in terms of Platonic philosophy, of which the distinctive tenet is that the real and eternal is the universal, not the individual. On this assumption, it was possible to say that the same real substance could exist in three, or indeed in any number of persons. In the case of God, the dogma builders were careful to say, essence is one with existence, and therefore in him the individuals are as real as the universal. Platonism, having lent the formula for the Trinity, became the favourite philosophy of many of the Church Fathers, and so introduced into Christian thought and life the Platonic dualism, that sharp distinction between the temporal and the eternal, which belittles the practical life and glorifies the contemplative. This distinction, as aggravated by Neo-Platonism, further affected Eastern Christianity in the 6th century, and Western Christianity in the 9th, chiefly through the writings of the pseudo-Dionysius Areopagita, and gave rise to Christian mysticism. It was then erected into a rule of conduct through the efforts of Pope Gregory VII, who strove to subject practical and civil life entirely to the control of ecclesiastics and monks, standing for contemplative supernatural life. The latter included all purely mental work, which more and more tended to concentrate itself upon religion and confine itself to the clergy. In this way, it came to be considered an utter disgrace for any man engaged in mental work to take any part in the institutions of civil life, and particularly to marry. He might indeed enter into illicit relations and rear a family of nephews and nieces without losing prestige, but to marry was to commit suicide. Such was the condition of things in the days of Abelard. But while Platonism, with its real universals, was celebrating its ascetic, unearthly triumphs in the West, Aristotelianism, which maintains that the individual is the real, was making its way in the East. Banished as heresy beyond the limits of the Catholic Church, In the 5th and 6th centuries, in the persons of Nestorius and others, it took refuge in Syria, where it flourished for many years in the schools of Edessa and Nisibis, the foremost of the time. From these it found its way among the Arabs, and even to the illiterate Muhammad, who gave it 1. Theoretic theological expression in the 112th Surah of the Koran. He is one God, God the Eternal. He neither begets nor is begotten, and to him there is no peer. In which both the fundamental dogmas of Christianity are denied, and that too on the ground of revelation. 2. Practical expression, by forbidding asceticism and monasticism, and encouraging a robust, though somewhat coarse, natural life. Islam, indeed, was an attempt to rehabilitate the human. In Abelard's time, Arab Aristotelianism, with its consequences for thought and life, was filtering into Europe and forcing Christian thinkers to defend the bases of their faith. Since these, so far as defensible at all, depended upon the Platonic doctrine of universals, and this could be maintained only by dialectic, this science became extremely popular, indeed almost the rage. Little of the real Aristotle was at that time known in the West, but in Porphyry's introduction to Aristotle's Logic was a famous passage in which all the difficulties with regard to universals were stated without being solved. Over this the intellectual battles of the first age of scholasticism were fought. The more clerical and mystic thinkers, like Anselm and Bernard, of course sided with Plato, but the more worldly, robust thinkers inclined to accept Aristotle, not seeing that his doctrine is fatal to the Trinity. Prominent among these was a Breton, Roscelin, the early instructor of Abelard. From him the brilliant, fearless boy learnt 2 terrible lessons. 1. That universals, instead of being real substances, external and superior to individual things, are mere names, hence nominalism, for common qualities of things as recognized by the human mind. 2. That since universals are the tools and criteria of thought, the human mind, in which alone these exist, is the judge of all truth. A lesson which leads directly to pure rationalism, and indeed to the rehabilitation of the human as against the superhuman. No wonder that Roscelin came into conflict with the church authorities, and had to flee to England. Abelard afterwards modified his nominalism, and behaved somewhat unhandsomely to him, but never escaped from the influence of his teaching. Abelard was a rationalist and an asserter of the human. Accordingly, when definitely adopting the vocation of the scholar, he went to Paris to study dialectic under the then famous William of Champeaux, a declared Platonist, or realist as the designation then was. He gave his teacher infinite trouble by his subtle objections, and not seldom got the better of him. These victories, which made him disliked both by his teacher and his fellow pupils, went to increase his natural